Hello. Hello, this is the My Artifact episode number 4038. Today's date is 5th of May 2026. It's been almost like a night at 9:48 p.m. Alright, let's just jump into the question. Alright, question is, will user have private daily access? Will user have private daily access? Private daily access. I am not really understand the question. Let me kind of like a Google it. Okay. Translate in Hindi. क्या उपयोक्ता को निजी डायरी तक पहुंच प्राप्त होगी? So way more Hindi than just say वापरण्याकरता खाजगी डायरीमध्ये प्रवेश मिळेल काय? वापरण्याकरता. Well, okay, I do understand. Alright. Okay, first of all, what exactly is this question and why am I asking this question to myself? Okay, I wanted to build an app called My Artifact. What exactly is this app? It's a kind of like a basically when you wrote the diary every single day, there is a problem. The way that you wanted to write the diary, you can't write the diary because the way that you think, you can't write the way that you think. Sorry, you can't write the way that you think. Why? Because of that key, we actually think so rapidly, and writing is a kind of like a very slow process comparison to the thinking. Okay. In the writing process, it is became slow is because of that there is a lot of constraint. You need to think about pen, pencil, convenience, okay, spelling mistake, okay, lot of stuff. So because of this thing, you cannot write diary properly. That's why very people are kind of like assembly record their journal or sorry, like write their journal or things and that. So I thought that, okay, what if instead of writing a journal, what if we could do recording a journal, like recording a kind of like a diary? I called that artifact, audio artifact. Okay, yeah. This is stuff that you are kind of like listening. This is My Artifact, episode number 4038. I have been doing this thing for almost like 11 years. I am doing this thing every single day. It's a kind of like a simply diary, but instead of writing a diary, I am kind of like a recording my diary, audio recording my diary. I call that artifact. Okay. Because of this artifact, it had so much amount of value in me. Okay. The person that I am today and the person that I will become tomorrow, it is all because of the artifact. Okay. And basically, yeah, the amount of value it actually add in my personality, in myself, I wanted to share this value. I wanted to share this technicality. I wanted to share this method to the people so that people should supposed to be utilize the full potential of the artifact. How do I do that? By building an application. Okay. My application is a kind of like a somewhat something like a YouTube. In the YouTube platform, people kind of like assembly record their video, upload their video, other people sees your video. Okay, yeah. In the artifact platform, same. You have to record the artifact, upload the artifact, other people listen the artifact. Okay, yeah. The only one catch is that key user will not gonna know who is that they are kind of like a listening, like a completely private. Okay, yeah. You just kind of like a hearing kind of like a random username that you don't know. Like basically, my name is Saurabh Authare, but my is artifact handle name would be Prozac 1943 or Jackson 11 or yeah. So this is would be kind of like a some username, so that it would be kind of like a much more kind of like a somebody gives me freedom to kind of like share my thoughts without kind of like somebody showing my identity and things and that. Privacy is somewhat something really essential. Okay, yeah, and I'm wanted to provide that privacy. Okay, so this is my application. Now, before I wanted to build any kind of like application, I wanted to aware of every possible consequences, good, bad, right, wrong. There are so many possible consequences. So I wanted to know that all the possible consequences. So I went to ChatGPT. I tell my app ID and things and that, and I tell them, he suggests me at least like 100 question of all the possible consequences will gonna happen, and how do I supposed to solve that consequences. Okay, yeah. So ChatGPT kind of like a suggests me hundreds of question. This is one of those question. By the way, this question is bit more kind of like a little bit of kind of like a something difficult to understand, but it's not. And sometimes I'm not really understanding this question. Will user have a private diary access? Private diary access. Well, okay. So what is actually private diary access? Okay, yeah. My entire platform, its entire kind of like artifact, is a private. Okay, yeah, is completely anonymous. Okay, user can able to be kind of like a record their thoughts, share their thoughts, being anonymous and things and that. So is user will kind of like a have a private diary access? Yeah, it is. It is a kind of like a private diary access. It's a kind of like a thing is that na ki, yeah. Wait, let me kind of like a something. I have to go to number two. Let me go to the number two. Then I will let me pause here for a while. Oh boy. All right. I'm just feel like really good. Okay, like something get out from your body. Okay. I don't know. Have you ever feel like that? Like when you kind of like a pass out your like when you went to number two, and you kind of like a properly exhaust everything. Okay. Okay. By the way, I have to be talk. Okay, about this particular topic. I never really talk about this thing in Artifact, but okay. So basically, is this thing ki I'm actually from India. Okay, yeah. I'm actually talking about shit. Okay, okay. So basically, is this thing that ki who invented a toilet, like a basically commode, specifically commode. Okay, and and basically why is that like a like okay, I am kind of like somebody very much kind of like somebody that na confused and in so many possible way. Okay, I'm actually thinking about na okay. Right now you might be kind of like a thinking that ki, what is actually this stupid shit, but it's a yeah, it's kind of like a stupid shit, but I wanted to know the why we are kind of like a shitting like this. Okay, like okay, every species are kind of like a something have a particular posture of body posture, so that they were supposed to be exhaust uh, stool out of their body. Okay, yeah. Have you seen a dog shitting? They are kind of like something they shit like this, like they bend their behind this to they kind of like a shit something very different. Okay, yeah. Same goes the same kind of like a body form followed by every other kind of like an animal who has a kind of like a two legs and sorry two four legs. Okay, yeah. uh Basically is this thing na ki when we are trying to do a shit, okay, when we are kind of like a get out from get out things out of our body. Okay, yeah. We need that kind of like a something we need um I'm kind of like something very wrong, I'm not really sure. Okay, but basically is this thing na in Indian style doing shitting is a kind of like a natural way of shitting. Not kind of like a somebody contributing only Indian, but probably is this thing that ki like a when you kind of like a sit like a yeah, okay, if you are from US and Europe, you might not understand this thing that ki like you actually using a commode all the time. Okay, yeah. And I'm gonna tell you when the commode is actually happened and why is that thing and that and that. Okay, but still let me kind of like clarify. Okay, so basically this thing, a natural way of doing a shitting is that ki you just kind of like somebody just use your two leg, okay, yeah, to kind of like sit, okay, but you are not sitting, you are kind of like somebody hovering over on the two legs, okay, yeah, and you are kind of like a make sure you are kind of like somebody all your, like I don't know how, like you already realize then what is exactly body posture when you kind of like a shit. I'm not talking about commode, I'm talking about kind of like somebody Indian style or kind of like a Chinese style, because Chinese style toilet and Indian style toilet are kind of like a somewhat something same. Okay, yeah. Like basically this thing, na Asian kind of like a somebody shitting thing is kind of like a somewhat something same. Okay, I'm not really sure, but yeah, probably because I seen a kind of like a somebody couple of videos in the Chinese middle class family. They also have kind of like a somebody those kind of like a somebody sitting size arrangement. They just kind of like a somebody just do and they just yeah, basically this body form posture to kind of like uh, exhaust your stool, okay, it's a very natural form, okay, yeah, it create a pressure on your kind of like a intestine and it kind of like release everything, okay, yeah. But when you use commode, you can't kind of like a something that ki like basically this thing na ki, like I don't know, it's not even hygiene, it's not even convenient, it's not even kind of like a something that key you could kind of like exhaust very much properly. So and another thing is that now why the hell not we, like basically American and Europe people are kind of like using paper toilet paper, and I am not really sure why they are using that thing, because it's very unhygiene. Like use water, it's simple, convenient, eco-friendly, best for kind of like assembly not to get clog out. But still I don't know why. Okay, yeah, why does kind of like a make there is a natural process to kind of like a let out our pass out the stool, why we are kind of like making this complicated. Okay, yeah, because let me tell you one thing, I never really been on US Europe, okay, I'm not really sure about that, but the way that I kind of like consume the information through internet and things and that, so they have a commode, okay, yeah, you have to be sit on the commode, which is very unhygiene, like basically, okay, like let me tell you one thing that he commode would be kind of like always kind of like a clean and things and that, okay, yeah, maybe that is clean, but like dude, it's a kind of like a thing that na, ki people are do shit over there. Okay, yeah, even if you clean the toilet still get messy, and I'm talking about kind of like a clean toilet, like a what about kind of like a, such a toilet that are kind of like a, something just a like a like a regular use toilet, they might not that clean. So I don't know, like basically you are kind of like sitting on that thing and you just passing that, I don't know, okay, yeah, it's just like I don't really feel like kind of like a convenience, okay, yeah, it's a very unhygienic to me, okay, yeah, because I don't know, like I don't know, like I don't know, yeah, I just like basically this is na ki this is kind of like a very much thing, okay, yeah. Another thing is that ki okay, thank God in India we have jet spray. Jet spray is a kind of like a much more good, okay, it's a jet spray means it's a kind of like a nozzle that you just press it and there is a kind of like a water kind of like a spray at a jet spray, and you could kind of like a clean up your kind of like a somebody whatever the attach on your kind of like a things, okay, yeah, it would be much more convenient, okay. But in US and Europe they have a toilet paper and it is even more unhygienic, even more, I don't know, it's, oh my god, how does people are, why does people are kind of like use toilet paper, why, like I don't know why they have such a invention that just makes it things even more complicated, okay, like sometimes na, some innovation are kind of like a happen through the humanity that just doesn't make any sense at all, because innovation meant to be happen for make things much more easier, but toilet paper are kind of like a, something such a thing that just makes it worse, Yeah, why not they have jet spray? It's just very simple thing. Why not they have a jet spray? It just okay. Commode would be kind of like okay. Let's accept this thing that ki most of the people are not able to be kind of like a sit like that, like a natural way of kind of like exhausting. Like a if you are kind of like age person, then probably you might not sit like that, and you need a kind of like a somebody that key support and things and that. So that's why you just have to kind of like somebody you have to utilize the commode. By the way, uh, in Rome, okay, in Roman, like basically in Rome, probably almost like a before the Christianity, okay, yeah, they have kind of like a toilet seat. Yeah, at that time they have a toilet seat, which is kind of like you just have to sit in that seat. There is a kind of like a hole. You just have to do that thing. And it's a community, by the way. It's a legit community. People just kind of like a like basically in today's world, bathroom meant to be private, but at that time in the Rome in before the Christ, okay, yeah, they have a kind of like a simply community bathroom, like literally community. They just kind of like all people are kind of like a sitting on that chair, look like a chair, but it's not a chair. They have a kind of like a hole, okay, yeah. You just have to sit, let out all your kind of like a things, okay, yeah, and they are talking and shooting at the same time. It's a kind of like I'm not really sure what the fuck is that. Okay, okay. So basically this is kind of like a this is kind of like a commode is a kind of like a upgraded version of that thing, okay, yeah. So let's talk about the toilet paper. Yeah, so why US and European people are kind of like using the toilet paper, okay, yeah. And like why not they are kind of like using jet spray and water and things and that, okay. So it's not really that ki people are kind of like assembly not to use toilet paper. Like basically before that they are kind of like using a water. Okay, yeah. I think okay, like basically I just kind of like watched the documentary. Okay, and from that documentary I'm kind of like a try to tell you things like that I'm not really sure am I exactly right or not, but what I'm trying to tell you, I'm just kind of like a connecting dots and things and that. I'm not really sure. Okay, I already kind of like give you disclaimer. Okay, so basically this thing, some innovation is meant to be happen for kind of like a make the human life much more easier. Okay, yeah. But some innovation meant to be happen for a kind of like a some political agenda or kind of like a something that key financial growth or maybe something that key they just okay, yeah, like okay, what exactly is this thing, what is exactly that, okay. So basically is this thing in the World War I, okay, yeah, people are kind of like a simply get injured, okay, yeah, soldiers get injured, okay, yeah. And obviously at that time they really required a band-aid, okay, for kind of like a cover up that injury and things and that so that soldiers should supposed to be survive, okay. So basically this thing now at that time Europe, the entire World War I is actually happening in the Europe, okay, yeah. So probably building the kind of like a simply the factory over there and kind of like a supply the kind of like a bandit to the soldier, it's not really possible because next day the war will happen, the factory might not gonna survive, okay, yeah. So best location for kind of like a creating those bandits and things and that is bandits and medicine are actually in US because US has a kind of like a much more bigger factories and things and that and it's actually far away from the enemy country and things and that. So basically most of the kind of like assembly factories are made, okay, yeah, like a US president and kind of like assembly the bandit company, they have kind of like a agreement that ki please make the bandit for our soldier and things and that because not only they are kind of like a export those bandit or medicine to the kind of like a they are a soldier, but other soldiers too, like a Britain soldiers, France soldiers and things and that, okay, yeah. Now I'm talking about kind of like a millions and billions of medicines and kind of like a bandit and things and that. Okay, so they are kind of like a creating those bandage, okay, medicine equipment and things and that for the kind of like a some soldiers, okay, yeah. Now World War I actually started from 2014 to 2018, okay, yeah. Now after the World War I, then what exactly happened that key the company who kind of like a made those kind of like a banded, okay, they have kind of like a question, because they have kind of like a simply millions of worth of rupees of kind of like a simply goods regarding about medicines and kind of like equipment, and the war is actually over. So what do we supposed to do? Okay, yeah, because it's not a kind of like a things that key kind of like a things that key probably like basically, yeah, like we have kind of like a so many product that for kind of like a assembly, yeah, like we have so many product and war is actually over, then what do we supposed to utilize this kind of like assembly product? Okay, yeah. So kind of like assembly US government and kind of like those bandage company or kind of like a theater company, they kind of like assembly try to figure it out what better ways to kind of like utilize whatever the kind of like equipment that we made. We have to be kind of like utilize that thing, but how do we supposed to utilize that? Okay, yeah. So basically, is this thing bandage at that time are kind of like a really good kind of like a for kind of like a when the clog is actually happen, like when the kind of like a blood is actually wounded. Sorry, the like a kind of like a somebody the soldier is actually wounded. The bandage is kind of like a somebody try to prevent the blood flow. Okay, yeah, so that soldier should supposed to be survive and things and that and that. Okay, yeah. But the problem is that na ki that bandage are kind of like a somebody that ki like a basically they are not kind of like a whole like sometimes some sort of condition actually happened that ki that bandage really required a kind of like a somebody that very strong firm, so that they should supposed to be hold much more blood inside them, so that like basically is this thing. Okay, so they kind of like decided that ki let's make bandage much more compact, much more kind of like a holding lot of blood inside of them, they will not supposed to be leak and things and that as also prevent the blood, okay, from getting outside the body and things and that, and because this is the first kind of like assembly medical medical things that they should supposed to provide. It's not really that ki soldier actually wounded and let's get to the hospital and do the operation. It's not really possible at that time. Bandage is the only kind of like assembly first kind of like a medicine should supposed to provide, so that at least kind of like a something that ki soldier should supposed to be survive and things like that. But the kind of like a something that ki war is actually over. Okay, yeah. Then after that, what they should supposed to be realize. Okay, so they realize that ki they made us kind of like a somebody such a bandage that they could supposed to be hold so much amount of water inside of them, and basically they also kind of like a somebody prevent the blood. Okay, yeah. So they kind of like a utilize this bandage for kind of like a create the sanitary pad. Okay, yeah, like a basically is this thing, the sanitary pad, the birth of sanitary pad is actually started from US when they kind of like a created. I'm not really sure, like some people kind of like a thinking that ki sanitary pad is actually kind of like assembly established before the World War One. I'm not really sure about that, but like most of the kind of like a people actually kind of like a believe that ki after the World War One, when the remaining bandage are actually happening, they are kind of like somebody create those kind of like a sanitary pad for the women. Okay, because that sanitary pad, that bandages are kind of like a somebody that ki upgraded so much, so that they would kind of like a holding so much amount of blood and things, and they will not kind of like a create any leakage and things and that and that. So basically is this thing that ki this kind of like a sanitary pad is actually established for the women when they have periods and things and that and that. Okay, yeah. Now another thing is that ki obviously is this thing awareness. Okay, yeah, because at that time kind of like a so not every woman are kind of like using those sanitary pad. Okay, yeah. And as also is this thing that na ki how many women will kind of like a buy those sanitary pad? Probably maybe kind of like a once or two or things, so maybe kind of like a max to max, I don't know, 10 15, I'm not really sure okay how many pads, but probably would be very less. Okay, yeah. The production that they have is kind of like a millions of worth of goods. Okay, yeah. And they need to sell almost like a millions of kind of like a sanitary pad. Okay, yeah. But sanitary pad is a kind of like a simply such a kind of like a simply very like a very kind of like a very specific kind of like a product, a very niche product for utilize for kind of like a very niche kind of like a people for very limited quantity, not too much. Okay, yeah. So sanitary pad is not really possible, but sanitary pad is kind of like something invented from that World War One. Okay, yeah. Now what do we supposed to do? We still have a kind of like a lot of kind of like assembly products. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing. Then what is actually happened? That key a first aid kit. Okay, yeah. The first aid kit kind of like established. Now what is actually first aid kit? Okay, is that key before the World War One. Okay, yeah. every kind of like a soldier doesn't really have any first aid kit, doesn't really require any kind of like a first aid kit, or doesn't really carry the first aid kit. Okay, yeah. But after World War One, okay, yeah, they realized that first aid kit is kind of like a somewhat something really essential in the war or any kind of like a scenario and things and that. Okay, yeah. So it is really essential for every kind of like a soldier. They should supposed to be carry that first aid kit. They have kind of like a bandage, kind of like a tape, or kind of like a things. That thing they should supposed to be carry. Okay, yeah. When the soldier will actually thanks. So basically, they kind of like assembly share this idea that every soldier should supposed to be carry that first aid kit for their kind of like assembly, for their kind of like assembly awareness, for their kind of like assembly, for their safety things, because medical help somewhat something kind of like a you will get or not. But the kind of like a this kind of like, and it's a like, if you are thinking about kind of like a very big first aid box, no, it's not. They just kind of like assembly just a very tiny box. Okay, yeah, probably maybe kind of like assembly just a kind of like something just like a basically is this thing 2 cigarette packet of box. Okay, yeah, like this kind of like a very tiny box. Okay, yeah. And every soldier should supposed to be carry that kind of like a small box. So they are kind of like a market that bandage, whatever the kind of like a remaining the bandage that they have, they are kind of like a market that bandage in that way, so that every kind of like a somebody that every soldier should supposed to be carry. And they are kind of like exporting those kind of like a goods not only in the US but as also European country. Okay, every country that they have a kind of like a soldier, they should supposed to be kind of like utilize this bandage. Okay, yeah. But even after that thing, still they have kind of like a lot of medicine. Okay, still lot of kind of like a bandage and things and that. Okay, yeah, because obviously it is like a like basically is this, even if they are kind of like a selling those bandage to the all over the kind of like a soldier all around the world and things and that, because still they have so many left. Okay, yeah. In the kind of like assembly US go down, they have so many kind of like a bandage are left. Okay, yeah. And basically is this thing that na ki, and that product are kind of like a something is this thing that ki, like if you're not using that product na, it will kind of like a somebody like a like a basically it will spoil or things and that. Okay, yeah. And they will kind of like a gain a lot of massive kind of like some damage on things and that. They really require kind of like a government support. Because of that na, ki in the World War One, they kind of like a help to the US and American soldier and kind of like a British soldier to kind of like a provide the medicine and things and that. But right now is this thing that ki bandage company, they are kind of like a very much in trouble situation, that what they should supposed to do, because they have kind of like a lot of products, and basically war is actually over. So how do you supposed to do that? Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing that he in the World War One, okay, yeah, what exactly happened, that he at that time, okay, yeah, when soldier are actually in the war, okay, and when they are kind of like a passing the stool, they are kind of like doing this thing. So basically at that time, okay, they don't really carry the like they have kind of like a very limited amount of water. Okay, yeah. And obviously you cannot kind of like utilize their water for kind of like somebody that sweeping the ass and things and that, because water is kind of like very much essential at that time. Okay, yeah. And as also very cold winter. Okay, because entire World War One actually happened in the Europe. Okay, so basically is this thing na, they are kind of like somebody utilizing bandage for kind of like a basically wiping their ass after they kind of like did this thing in World War One. Soldier do that thing. Okay, yeah. And they realize that ki, what if kind of like a people start doing it that, okay, yeah, like using bandage to kind of like wiping their ass. Okay, but like basically is this thing that na ki soldier do that thing because of they don't really have any choices. But why does kind of like a people do that thing? They are kind of like a good with the water, right? Yeah. So I'm not really sure about, but kind of like a thing is that na ki they kind of like a something like that ki government convince, because government actually convince them ki, okay, let's kind of like a create such a product like a toilet paper. Okay, yeah. And toilet paper is a kind of like a utilized for kind of like a ass swipe, so that we should supposed to be kind of like a something that ki like basically is this in I think I'm not really sure what is actually the agreement happened between the US government and US companies, US that bandage medicine companies. I'm not really sure, but kind of like such a like a US countries, they don't want that ki this kind of like assembly company should supposed to be kind of like a bankrupt because of the kind of like a war is actually over and things and that. Okay. Okay, because medicine is kind of like a somewhat something really essential, even if there is no wars, but medicine is kind of like a something really essential. And uh, and basically the government are kind of like a helping those companies to kind of like a simply that key, like basically just at least earn revenue from something, even if that is stupid, on revenue. Okay, yeah. So they kind of like assuming government kind of like allow them ki, yeah, you made the toilet paper, then yeah, you could sell the toilet paper. Okay, yeah. Basically in returns you are kind of like earning some sort of amount of revenue from the people. Yeah, do it. Okay, yeah. Kind of like assembly that ki government kind of like give the full support. So then kind of like somebody that medicine bandage company, they are kind of like making those kind of like a toilet paper, and they are kind of like selling those toilet paper to the normal citizen. Okay, yeah. And they when they do that thing, that idea is actually working really well. I'm not really sure why that idea kind of like a work really well. Why does people are choose to be kind of like a ass swipe instead of kind of like somebody using water to I don't know why does they do that, but they kind of like somebody, I don't know how they market this product in a such a way, like I don't know, but people convince. Again, people have started using the kind of like a toilet paper, and since then they are kind of like using toilet paper. Okay, it's a kind of like a thing that na ki, I don't know how that thing actually happened. Maybe kind of like a government actually allow them things and that. Probably, maybe kind of like a somebody that key water limitation. But yeah, like if I'm kind of like a thinking about that now, the water limitation might be a problem. But no, there is no water limitation at all. Na? Like there are a lot of water at that time. It's not only that key water is kind of like something that key scarcity and things and that we should prevent and things and that. Like basically most of the kind of like a World War I actually happened in the kind of like a Europe. If you are thinking about that key, if the Africa or kind of like a Middle East, the war actually happened, then I might kind of like started believing that ki, okay, water scarcity and because of this thing, yeah, but the war is actually fought in the Europe. Okay, and Europe is actually kind of like a lot of freshwater kind of like a reservoir, lot of available natural freshwater. By the way, they are actually available because the top of the Arctic Ocean, Arctic kind of like some Arctic circles and things and that. So they have kind of like a lot of fresh water. Okay, yeah, and same goes with the US. Okay, like a Canada is a kind of like a fresh source of water. Okay, yeah, like they have kind of like a very big reservoir regarding about fresh water and things and that, and most of the kind of like some rivers actually flow from Canada to kind of like a US, and they will always getting really fresh water. So I'm not really sure that ki why does people are actually convinced to kind of like using the toilet paper to kind of kill. I don't know. I just really not really sure how the people actually convinced to use toilet paper, and still they are kind of like using it that. Dude, sometimes I just kind of like so stupid that the artifact should supposed to talk about something that kind of like a meant to be talk about my app, and I'm talking about shit. I don't know. I just like I don't know. I just kind of like suddenly exhaust my stool, and I just had that idea while I'm doing my shitting. I'm kind of like had that idea that ki, yeah, like why does kind of like people are actually using the toilet paper and things and that. It's not convenience, really not. I don't know why. Whatever. Okay. I have to end here. Okay. By the way, let me give you the answer regarding about the question. The question says that will user have private daily access? Definitely, artifact is a kind of like a private daily access. Okay. It's a kind of like anonymous. It's a private. It's a daily. It's a you have to do this recording. It's anonymous. Yeah. All right. This is it. Thank you.